Hey everyone. So today I'm going to talk about Ghost of Tsushima and why I didn't purchase it day one, despite me wanting and talking about how much I wanted an open world samurai game. So the first reason is the visuals. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's a technical achievement. Creatively and technically, it looks amazing with all the colors and just the level of detail and the attention to detail with the accuracy of the time period. But my issue is with I guess you would say the filter or just the clarity of the visuals. It goes along with this recent trend of how, like, everything looking muted and very gray. The last single player Star Wars game did this as well. Almost every new single player game does this, and it's annoying me more and more. The Last of Us Part 2, it wasn't as bad. There was a lot more clarity. But I call this the Vaseline effect. It just kind of makes everything slightly more blurry, less clarity. And I think it's a stylistic choice to do with how films are nowadays, how everything is gray and muted. I don't know, but I just don't like it. The second reason is I just got the sense that even though they're going in a slightly different direction with the open world concept, with having you follow the wind instead of having to follow an arrow or a marker on a map, like, I commend that. It seemed kind of like Breath of the Wild, but I still get the sense that it is an open world game like every other open world game that's come before, specifically the Assassin's Creed style, where you're checking off things on a map, like there's question marks on a map, and then you go to some place and says you completed this objective. And I know that's a weird thing to nitpick about. I mean, it's a video game. What else can you really do with it? I don't have any answers for that. I just know that it seems very cut and paste how they'll take an idea, which is a really cool idea, like in this, having a samurai in an open world, and then just put it into whatever formula is popular at the time. And I feel like this formula has been going for at least 10 years now. Like, it's progressed to a point where they have it down to a T. They know what they're doing with it, which is good. Refinement is good, but at a certain point, it just feels like a product. And I'll mention Way of the Samurai more later, but comparing it to that, I'd say that was like one of the biggest hidden gems for me on the PS2. And it just felt unique. It didn't really have a formula. It was very janky. So it wasn't polished. Like, this game definitely looks polished, which is good, but at a certain point there's almost too much polish. Unless you're doing something original or interesting, if it's polished and it looks somewhat generic, then it just kind of loses its appeal, at least for me. And I think maybe I'm just becoming a little jaded with the current state of video games, and especially with open world single player third person shooters or third person games. The third point, reason why I didn't purchase this game day one is, now, I don't want to make this a thing about cultural appropriation. This isn't what this is about. Oh, maybe it is about that. I don't know. Nibbler seems to disagree. The fact that it's made by Sucker Punch, an American developer, and they're a really good developer. They made the Sly Cooper games on the PS2, and the Infamous series, which I only played the second one for a good amount, and then the third one for a little bit. And I wasn't too big on those games, but they were very polished. They're a good developer. The Sly Cooper games were great. The fact that it's an American developer, like, I didn't initially realize I had an issue with that, but there was, for some reason, my hype for this game wasn't nearly as high as I thought it should be. And I came to the conclusion, at least one of the conclusions, is that with a samurai game, with a game that's set in Japan or feudal Japan, it just doesn't sit right that like the Japanese have a specific style of graphics, of controls, of camera movement. And yes, a lot of times their games are janky. They might not control amazingly. They have just a lot of little flaws, but that is part of the personality of those games. And it just for some reason doesn't sit right with me, it being an American developer making this. So I mentioned Way of the Samurai. That game was not polished. It had a lot of issues, but I never played a game like it up until that point at the time. It came out in 2001. It wasn't fully open world, but you could explore the environment. There was like a decent sized map, and you could talk to characters. You would run into other samurai and have fights with them. You could pick up like a bunch of swords and had different stats. The fighting mechanics were good. Like they were actually like it wasn't perfect, but it was really fun. And you could play the game in multiple ways. It was one of those games it only takes about 2 hours to beat. Like you could play for like 2 hours or 5 hours, but you could beat it in an hour or two. But there was like 10 different ways that like endings you could get. So you could join different factions and different things would happen. If you like end up slashing some like NPC, then that changes the whole game. He could be an important character that you just killed, and then, well, you can't join that faction anymore. You have to do something else. And I've never seen a game quite like it since or before. It was an original idea. Like I said, it wasn't perfect, but I just appreciate it for what it was. And I guess like at that time I was more into samurai games, so it was like a bigger deal, or just samurai like culture in general. But it just feels like they're just taking that idea, which I really wanted them to take that idea and put it in a bigger open world. But it just feels like any other, like just like Infamous, DLC for Infamous, but made into a full game, if that makes any sense. I know like it is really cynical, like, and I probably am, but I'm still gonna buy the game someday, or like if it comes on PlayStation Plus, I still want to play it. I still think it looks good, but I can't justify purchasing a game because it's a game that I've always wanted, even if it doesn't necessarily look great to me when I'm actually seeing the trailers for it. If I'm gonna buy a game full price day one nowadays, it has to be something that I absolutely have to play or feel like I have to play. And with this game, it didn't feel like that. But that's about it. Hope you enjoyed or tolerated this rant. And I'll talk to you guys again soon.